Lots of things to think about. So, it's a great pleasure and honor to introduce someone who I've known for quite a long time now, Andreas. Last time I was presenting, I was due to present with Andreas, but I ended up having to do an imitation, an acting job, because you weren't able to come to the Pistoia event. So I actually had to be both me and Andreas. Where is the value? Where is the value, Paul? I did that impression of you. But it's a pretty good impression, right? So Andreas is going to talk to us about navigating digital transformation in pharmaceutical R&D. However, there is obviously the question of, come on, wake up. I know it's, come on, a little bit of energy. What is it we need? We need the movie. No, he didn't say Star Wars. He didn't. However, it was a little bit related, so it was Interstellar. Oh, listen to that. Oh, the deep hum. I asked him why. So part of it is it's a fascinating story, but the musical score is phenomenal, and you explained how they went on and did that in there. So you can explain within your talk. I expect many references to Interstellar within there to set the bar even higher. So, ladies and gentlemen, Andreas.
And I would also say, the other movie I was debating was The Manchurian Candidate. But in our current political times, I thought not sure if that resonates well. So let's stick to science, right? Because Interstellar, I really appreciate. They work with Kip Thorne, and as a physicist, right? If you see kind of real science in a movie, that's always good. But someone said also Love Actually, right? Actually, Interstellar is kind of a love story between a father and a daughter, right? It's a family story, right? And hardcore science. Cool. Still, let's navigate, change management, I would say, in R&D. And where's Sandra? Yeah. Basically, after listening to your talk, I said, cool, I'm done, right? Thanks for that great presentation with all the reference to all the important literature and all of that. And luckily, I chose a different path, right? Because otherwise, we have given the exact same talk. But I will actually take a different approach, and I basically want to tell you a bit of a story about change management and answer 3 and perhaps a 4th question, right? The one is why, where, when, and perhaps a bit how, right? But if you expect the golden bullet, I have to disappoint you. But let's start actually with the downward. Okay, let's start with the why. Why should we actually look at the topic? Let's go a bit back kind of in history. And yes, you can use the black hole, right, in Interstellar, to go back in time. But basically, if you look at the history of research labs, or the pharmaceutical research labs, but also chemistry research labs, you've seen quite a change, right? Individuals actually working there, and, we actually had only few people, who could even spend their time on research, to, I would say, a cross-global, kind of collaboration setting. And that's why we all have jobs, I would say, a lot about digitalization as well, right? And with that, we have a constant change of pace. And if there's change, we should manage that one. The other one, and I actually used, a similar slide for quite some time. And I think, the only thing in recent years that I actually had to change is the bottom right-hand part, because years ago it's there's potential on AI and ML. And I think, it's a reality now. Yeah, but these are all reasons why we also have to say, like, okay, look, scientists actually have to look at tons of different things, right? How can we actually or help navigate them, through these, times? Yeah, and a concrete example, I think many of us here are familiar, are ELNs, right? And as you can see, also ELNs changed a bit over time, right? Paper-based to digital. And nowadays, I have not seen a true paper-on-glass ELN for quite some time, right? It's always a platform or a fabric or whatever, right? It becomes more and more complex. And this is also, if you see a bit, at least the pharmaceutical or mainly also the preclinical, research space, but, in other kind of parts, it's also very similar. What you clearly see is, the diversity and the amount of data, but also with that, the amount of tools and data points, it's just increasing, right? And, this is for me, a kind of a key motivator to actually say, hey, we have to kind of cope with that, kind of constant, change. Right. But where to start? Where do you need it? How do you need it? How is that going on? And thanks, Frederick. I think you had the way nicer slides, right? So this is the Pullman shop of what you nicely, actually explained. But basically, I have my 3 little scientists, they're kind of different, One's more the number cruncher, someone's more the wet lab scientist. But if you walk into a lab, and also there I can second, walk into a lab, you will see they are also overwhelmed, right? They still read papers, of course, right? Some, they really print it out. They have their Excel. They love it. They have highly complex machinery. They have low complex machinery. They have manual stuff to do, right? So it's actually a lot of things that they need to talk about. And then it's just one lab. There are many labs in a bigger company, right? But also in smaller companies, you have many labs. And it's kind of that spider web that is kind of interconnected, yeah? And now if you go in a global setting, right, you might actually have, that different scientists, right, in different labs need to work together and exchange data. Oh, and here it comes, yeah, that's the fun. And it might be on different continents, in different time zones and all of that, right? So this is kind of not easy. So where do you actually start? And this is my fun slide, and probably some of you have seen these slides already, but this is what I always refer to as the data producer versus data consumer paradigm. If you go back, right, and really say, like, okay, you have these 2 scientists, right? The one who looks at the data sits in the US, and the one who produced the data sits in China. Yeah, and now they need to work together. What happens? Let's look at the data producer side. I am the master of HPLC. I know everything about it. This is my data. No one else should look at it. Not necessarily the fair mindset, right? But you have that. But what they are actually after is like, okay, give me not any ELN, right? Whatever. Give me that highly specialized operating system that I can fulfill my task and get all my HPLCs done, basically in a second. Yeah, perfect. Now someone wants to look at that data, sitting on a different place on this beautiful planet, and they might not only look at, the master's HPLC data here, but a couple of other data sets, right? They might not even to find the data and all of that, right? So how do we kind of bridge that gap? That's not easy. And let me exemplify that at a very simple example. Probably all of you have seen, right? In pharmacology, let's look at IC50s here. Your data producer is actually sharing one data point. This one here, right? He puts a lot of effort into that data point, right? A lot of experiments, different concentrations, whatever, a bit of fitting, whatever, and then shares that one data point, hopefully, in a nice PowerPoint slide. Our data consumer, however, has tons of questions, right? Absolute, relative, did you do better in contraction? What is actually, the fit curve and all of that? Yeah. So this is kind of a bit of the challenge. And now you could ask, and that's my favorite question. Actually, I ask every person that I'm interviewing, right? Who is responsible for making the data fair? Left or right? I have not gotten a superb answer, to be honest, and I don't have one either, right? But I think this is a bit, where we actually need to work on that change, because it's very easy for the data consumer to say like, dear lab scientist, I need metadata. Oh, it takes you an hour. I don't care, because I can look at the data, derive insights, and stand in front of governance and say like, look, I found the new molecule, right? So how do you actually, give some of that praise back and actually, yeah, the data producer is the one that actually worked hard, right? So where do you actually, start now if you say like, hey, we want to move into a more fair environment, right? Where do you start with that change? Yeah, and this is one of my favorite quotes. People, not technology. And we heard that in different shapes and forms today a couple of times, but I truly believe we are in a people business, we are not in a technology business. Nowadays, I would say technology is that advanced, and we had a perfect talk now, right? Multi-agent, setups, that is super cool, but it's useless, right? If the people aren't using it and they are not trusting it, yeah? So PDG, where's the value? Yeah? Right. So, people, this is where we start. When? And I think many of you in different delivery forms, right, worked on digital projects. How many of you have thought like, oh, this time we get change management right? When have you brought in these favorite OCM consultants? Yeah, in the last 4 weeks, right? Yeah. And I said, Sandra, I sneaked in one theory, right? But I really like it. The point is also my wife is a psychologist, right? So she always trains me on these models. And let's look at a real-life example. You have two individuals sitting in a car. They're approaching a green traffic light. And the person on the passenger seat says, it's green. Okay, it is green, 3 words. Holy moly. There's a lot in these 3 words, right? This is from Schulz von Thun. It's one of the simple communication models. And you might have heard that, it's 4 mouths, 4 ears. So basically, every spoken message, written message, you can break down into these 4 different categories. So let's look at that. Factual. It's green, right? So the traffic line shows a green light. Factual, full stop. Appeal, go damn faster, right? Relationship, I hate it so much that when you drive, if I would drive, it would be so much better. And self-revelation, hey, I'm in a hurry, right? I really need to get to my appointment. Please, can you help me? Accelerate, yeah? Good, I think everyone can relate. You can find other examples, right? But now put that into our perspective, right? And let's imagine you kick off a new LIMS project or an ELN project or whatever, right? And then, of course, you say like, okay, well, we need use cases, right? Or we need to understand, we need to map out the processes and whatnot, right? And so you say like, okay, my colleagues or business analysts, they need to go out and interview. And now let's imagine a business analyst kicks off a meeting with a lab scientist or a bunch of lab scientists and actually say like, okay, look, we will introduce a new data capture workflow with the planned LIMS system. Well, okay, a new LIMS project is starting or has started already, yeah? Appeal, you need to change your workflow, believe it or not. There might also be, I actually know more about you, that workflow than you, right? And it can also be like, oh my God, I have to do that interview, it's a slow mover anyways, right? So this is a bit of a story where I just want to tell you, change management starts actually earlier before anything happens. With the first interaction, even before you even talk about the LIMS project, right? You kind of build up trust with your stakeholder community, right? This is where actually change management starts already. Good. Then we know when. And as I said, perhaps a bit on the how, right? And please, I don't have the golden bullet, but I basically have 3 slides where I say like, okay, that could be kind of a starting point. Bring it into your context, right? Stay curious, and listen and learn, and challenge me, right? And say like, Andreas, no, that's different. So the one thing is in our industry, I always say, why is it actually so complex? Why are we not just like automotive or so, right? And also there it's complex. But my piece of advice would be look at our playing field as that kind of triangle between the actual data, right? Because typically we first jump to systems and we jump to processes sometimes as well. But very often it's like a new LIMS system, that is our solution, right? It's one component. But look also at the data and look at these scientific workflows. And, this is kind of a triangle. And I had the example with data producer versus data consumer, right? And this is where kind of the 4th dimension, right, comes in. And luckily I can visualize that, right? Coming back to Interstellar, what do you do with ultimate, you get me, a physicist speaking. But you have different personas looking at that playing field, right? So a data scientist will look at that completely different than a wet lab scientist, than a leader or executive management, right? So my piece of advice is look at them separately, but don't forget about the others whenever you do something. Yeah. So you have to look at it holistically, but try to remember, okay, hey, what is actually the data that we deal with? In what kind of system, and because data travels typically through these systems, what is the workflow around that? The next one is one of my favorite topics. It's also if you have smaller kids, right? They crawl and then they walk and then they run. So I try to take digitalization in the same manner, and I included the 4th step, and that's the first one, and that's digitize, right? And I guess most of us work in paperless labs, right? But we still have the Paperless Lab Academy around, right? So there's still a digitized problem sometimes. Once you have it digitally now, you need to standardize. And I think we heard even today in the morning a couple of talks where this was actually the issue, right? How can you standardize across organizational boundaries, right? Across global boundaries, that you really, harmonize and standardize. And actually only then you can digitalize, right? And bring, digital workflows and systems into place before you even go to automate. And yes, I've seen that you start here, right? And then you realize, their workflow wasn't there. Oh, the data is not standardized. Right? And you work backwards. And not easy. And last but not least, and I was very happy that we had that topic today already. And I think even Sushi in the beginning kind of started with that a bit. It's digital scientists, multilingual scientists, and a lot of us that recognize that science and digital, and that's fine. And we are the translators, so bridging these two fields. Very often it's like, okay, if you can code a bit and you have done some wet lab work, at one point you're kind of the digital scientist. It's truly more, right? Because typically you also solve a business challenge, right? We're not just doing science for science sake and digital and technology for technology's sake. Yeah, and I think that is a clear call out to upskilling, right? And this brings me also kind of back to my title, right? And that starts also with us, right? It's very easy to say like, hey, we need change and others need to change. That's typically easier, but it's actually also us, that kind of needs to change to really become kind of a true bilingual, multilingual scientist. Right. So if you dozed off, that's totally fine. I basically prepared, my talk in one slide, right? And that is kind of the key take-home message, right? If we talk about, the digital transformation and especially change management around it, I would say you have to be fast. I just over lunch had, a discussion and said, like, a LIMS project can take 5 years. Not sure, right? If you really can do that. So, try to enable scientists that they also can, help themselves, right? Because I think, we need to have a certain speed. Yes, innovation is important. So also be kind of innovative. And also just today that we also have someone from Microsoft coming and, getting more, technology insights is super important, right? So stay curious and also look outside the industry. Be efficient. Yeah, every scientist would love to give me that one digital tool that I can do everything with. That would be perfect, highly integrated. Yeah. That's not easy. On the other hand, don't give them 20, right? And they might be a bit overwhelmed. Standardized. I think I talked, enough about it. And again, this is not only fair data. This is also workflows. This is processes. This is approaches. And be respectful, right? Your science colleagues actually deal with a lot of things, right? And you have to take that into account if you kind of pose more change onto them. Right. This is not the end, because we will discuss all about change management in a roundtable. Of course, you should listen to the next speakers, right? But if you have some mental capacity left, you can already tinker about these trigger questions, which PDG will then later on also present again, right? But this is a bit what we want to discuss, right? So what went wrong in your organization so far, and what can you learn in the future? And with that, many thanks for the attention, and open for questions.
Questions for Andreas? One there.
Gen AI can write code, therefore it can configure software. Do I still need to be multilingual?
Yes, because, very good. I did not define what I mean by multi-language, right? And I did not bring that slide. You can look actually in the definition of linguists. The spectrum here is you're basically fluent in 2 languages, like, you speak your mother tongue, right? That's one spectrum. The other one is you have your mother tongue, right? And then if you go to a trip to Portugal, you can order a coffee. This is the spectrum of multilingualism, right? And I see it the same way here, right? So it might actually be, you don't need to code because now you have Gen AI writing a Python code, right? But you damn need, to ask the right question, and then also, need to be able to kind of check that, right? So there is a certain level of understanding needed, and I think, that is for me more multilingual than actually, I can actually optimize serialization of a JSON element, right, rather efficiently, and set up whatever ID confirmation on a mass spec device. Yeah? So it's not necessarily that you need deep knowledge, but you need to be able to bridge the gap. Yes. Yeah.
Need to know what's right and wrong.
That helps.
It does. Other questions for Andreas? Other questions? Nothing about Interstellar? I think you could probably invest and look at a tesseract for the presentation of your multi-dimensional data, right? And then we could include time and other things. Just a thought.
Good.
Okay. Thank you.